Well, hello to all of you who are watching this live. This is actually me live with you right now if you're watching live. But for all of you who will watch this later on YouTube or watch it later on Facebook, welcome. My name is Corey. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a writer, and I'm a speaker, and I host a podcast as well as being a certified diversity and inclusion coach. I have these existential Sundays every week for folks who are find themselves at a place of deconstruction or decolonization of either their faith or their ideas about society. So you are more than welcome to hit the share button if you're on Facebook. You're more than welcome to hit the share button if you're on YouTube. If you are watching this later on and you want to wait to the very end to make sure that you trust what I'm about to say before you share it with everybody, feel free to do that. So I'm going to show you guys that, I'm not trying to dupe you again. Nandi, yes, it is really live right now. I am live. This morning, I tried a new thing where I pre-recorded something this morning and uploaded it, and it crashed for whatever reason. I'm going to just tell you, there will be times I may have to do that because on Sunday morning, I thought this church that I was singing for was going to be video, but they were actually live. So I had to pre-record, and it was a mess. It's a whole mess, probably user error and not the streaming platform. That's what I'm gonna go with for right now. If I find out it's the streaming platform, you will also know. So I'm gonna say hello to those of you who are live. Hello, Nandi, Don, Lisa, Sarah. Good to see all of you here today. Listen, I want to be very brief. I don't want to be here very long, but so guys, if you've been a part of Existential, make sure you hit the share button. And right now, actually, what I'd like you to do as you're commenting, here's what I'd like for all of you who are watching to do. Could you, as we get started, would you, and throughout, if names pop into your mind, would you put the names of Black people who have died tragically due to anti-Black violence in the comment section? I want the comment section to honor their lives today. So if you have multiple names, put those names in there. If you only know one, put those names in there. Most recently, there has been yet another one. And that was, let me look at the comments. That was Rashard. I'm losing his last name. Those of you know Rashard that was just killed Friday night in Atlanta. I want to say, let me look here at the comments. Sorry for those of you who are watching this later on. I want to make sure I've got his name. I posted about it now, but his last name is, I'm losing his last name. It's not Taylor. It's Rashard. Okay, no, but Rashard Brooks. Thank you. So I'm seeing names. I'm seeing Sandra Bland. I'm seeing Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Adie Mae Collins. I'm seeing all of these names. Cynthia Wesley. I'm seeing these names, and I want you guys, those names are important to be here in the comments as I talk today, okay? Those names are important for the title of this broadcast. Now, I want to do something really quickly. I'm going to try to do it really quick to not bog you down with a bunch of stuff that you may or may not care about. But I want to talk for a moment about Jesus, but not the European Jesus who ascended to heaven and now sort of sits above everything and has no vested interest in anything political or social. Because that is the way a lot of people talk about Jesus nowadays. They talk about Jesus in a way that is like, this is someone who is European, but now neutral. Might as well be Swedish Jesus, because it's like this Jesus has no vested interest in human affairs at all. I don't want to talk about that Jesus because I don't know that Jesus. I don't know who that Jesus is. The Jesus that I understand from what the writers of Scripture presented about this dark-skinned Palestinian social activist was very much involved in the conversations that were happening in his day. And not just the conversations that were happening in his day, but he was involved in the social movements that were happening in his day. And so we've kind of lost in the Christian tradition, which I come from, we've kind of lost over the years our sense of movement. And it's become this sort of static religion that is upholding the status quo. And Western theologians and Western pastors and preachers have dragged Jesus into that upholding of the status quo place. And that's not where Jesus belongs, because that's not how Jesus operated. So while I'm talking about it, I recently just saw a message from a predominant, what am I trying to say? What's the word that's eluding me? Guys, I'm tired, so just bear with me. From a prominent white pastor who's been around for ages, saying what was the title? No more time to be silent, or something like that. And so I'm thinking, oh, he's going to say something about race. Tune in, and it's basically for 5 minutes of what I watched. It's a defense of America's racist history. So this is the flaw that we are seeing amongst people of faith who are talking about God. And if you are a person who doesn't have faith at all, you may be an atheist, an agnostic, whatever you have. I shouldn't say doesn't have faith at all, but that may be where your faith is. If your faith is in the fact that there is no God, or your faith is in there's a God, but the God is distant and nobody knows anything about that being, or you're a person who has faith. I just want to say out loud that I recognize that people of faith have done a really, really poor job of talking about this particular issue and a lot of social issues. And as a person of faith, I apologize for that. So this brown-skinned Palestinian social activist, Jesus, was alive in the first century. And during that time, there was Roman oppression. There was Roman occupation of the Jewish homeland. And the Romans had rebuilt their temple. But along with rebuilding their temple, the Romans had erected statues of their gods. They had their propaganda all throughout the Palestinian area. And they had they further cemented their idea of their Roman divinity, because they believed that Caesar was God. They further cemented that by minting coins that were propaganda, but they had images that suggested that Caesar was God. This is the era that Jesus is alive in. Okay, so he's living in this time. There are Jewish people who are offended, culturally offended in their religion, by the way the Romans handled themselves amongst them as Jews, because the Jewish people, when it came to God, had a couple of beliefs. They were, number one, they were monotheistic, which means they only believed that there was one true God. They didn't believe in many gods. They didn't believe that Caesar was God. That was not their belief system. They also held their ideas about God very sacred. So God was very sacred to them, so much so sacred that the ancient Jewish people did not say the name of God. They really talked about God in poetic language and through symbolism, but they didn't have images, nor did they talk about God like that. And so people who were personally offended by the way the Romans were handling the Jewish state, the way they were occupying them, the way they were oppressing them, the way they were forcing them to work to make sure that they stayed at the top of the food chain. Jewish people who had an issue with that had a couple of choices. One, you could just put your head down and accept it, and you could pay the Roman tax. But you also had to bear in mind that your obligation, your duty to your culture and to your God was to also pay a temple tax, and also to bring tithes of your grain and all of your produce to the priest in the temple. So you only had a slim margin left to survive because of the Romans' heavy taxation. So people in the Jewish community were revolting against it. This term zealot, there were zealots that lived amongst the Jewish people who were violent opposition to Roman oppression. Their idea was, we have to meet force with force. We have to meet violence with violence. The only way we'll ever have our freedom is the only way anyone in ancient days ever got freedom was through violent resistance. And then there were those who engaged in non-violent resistance. John the Baptist, the prophet out in the wilderness, would have been one of those people engaging in non-violent resistance to oppression and injustice. So let me tell you about a very famous phrase that Jesus said that you may have heard before, that has been quoted. If you've been to church or haven't been to church, you've probably heard this. There was this time where Jesus was somewhere, I don't remember where. The story is in the book of Mark, I think like Mark chapter 13 or something like that. Jesus is somewhere, and these people come up to him and they ask him, is it okay to pay taxes or not? Basically, that's what the question is. Is it okay for us to pay taxes, or should we not pay taxes? Knowing that this was a moment where Jesus, because he's living in this time as a rabbi, there's an expectation that he'll have something to say about this social issue. They come to him about it and wanting him to get involved in a debate, because the debate is, should we pay taxes or should we not? It violates the Jewish, our sense of our Jewish homeland, our sense of pride, our sense of dignity as Jewish people, violates our religion, violates our beliefs about God. So should we pay those taxes or not? Jesus was caught in a situation where if he says yes, all of the people who follow him who are Jewish and look to him to be a leader and a liberator would be like, that's not our guy. If he says, no, we should not pay taxes, right then and there, he could be turned over to the Romans to be hung on a cross, because being hung on a cross, which ultimately he came to anyway, but the Roman cross was their way of executing people who resisted their power. The cross was as much a message as it was a punishment. The cross was a way of saying, anyone who opposes us like this person did, this is the fate that you have to look forward to. So they're trying to get him executed, or trying to get him to basically no longer be a valid voice amongst the people who he was on the earth to liberate. Jesus handles this in the most brilliant way possible. I had never noticed it until like 2 or 3 years ago when I was reading one of my favorite scholars, and he pointed this out, and I was amazed by it. The first thing that Jesus says is not to answer the question, but he says, bring me one of those coins. Then he looks at the inscription on it. Jesus looks at this Roman propaganda. He sees that there's an image of Caesar ascending to God, or to the gods. That was an ancient representation of saying, this is a God to be worshipped. Carrying that coin was you affirming that this is a God to be worshipped. Using that system of exchange was your way of saying, this is a God who is to be worshipped. Jesus says, bring me the coin. And he looks at the inscription. And then he says, well, he asked them, whose inscription is this? They say it's Caesar's. And he says, okay, render to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's. He makes a distinction. He makes a distinction between God and Caesar. That's the first thing that I'm like, sort of like, how did I never see this before? That in this ancient culture, Caesar was God. So to say, render to Caesar what is Caesar's and God's what is God's, it's like, wait a minute, aren't they the same thing? And then the point that the scholar brought up that I had never really paid attention to till a couple of years ago, I can't believe I've never told you guys about this, is that Jesus doesn't carry the coin. Jesus doesn't participate in the system that reinforces the Romans' oppression of the Jewish people, that reinforces their dominance. He divests himself from even being a part of a system that establishes that kind of hierarchy. And then he walks away from it. He doesn't have a very long debate. And this is why I titled this this particular talk this way. We don't have time to debate either. Here in America, there seems to be this idea by people of all different skin tones who have gripped and held on to the idea of whiteness so tightly that they cannot imagine another way of living. They cannot imagine any other way of being in America other than to have this idea of whiteness. They seem to believe that when Black people who are suffering the killing of our bodies, the inequities that we suffer on a regular daily basis, the gaslighting, the microaggressions, the being followed around stores. I've gone down this list many, many times. That list of names that's in the comments below, that when we are expressing from that place, when we rise up to say, Black lives Matter, people actually believe that we are putting forth some sort of debate, that we're presenting a side of something, that we're putting something up for them to bring facts and data to combat. That is not what we are doing. This is not a town hall where when we say Black Lives Matter, that we're saying that so that you guys can come out and give us facts about black on black crime or anything else. That's not what we're doing. That's not something we're engaging in. That is not what we're here for. We are not here to debate. We are here seeking justice. People are out in the streets demonstrating, not because they want attention, not even because they want to destroy stuff. They are out there because they are crying out for justice. They're not out there for you to prove anything to white folks. We are not out here to prove to white people that we're smart, that we're capable, that we can lead, that we're articulate, that we're deserving of anything. That is not what we're here to debate. We are here for justice. For those of you that may or may not have heard the podcast episode that I recently recorded with my friend Eric Reed. Those of you that don't know who Eric Reed is the first person to take a knee. One of the first people. There's two other athletes who took a knee next to Colin Kaepernick when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee. And I had the privilege of having Eric on the podcast. And one of the most profound things that Eric said, he said, when we started kneeling, we didn't do so that all of America would start taking a knee. He said the following line, and I want you to hear this loud and clear. He said, all we ever wanted was justice, period. We weren't trying to prove something. We weren't trying to say anything about the flag. We weren't trying to say anything about the military. We weren't trying to say anything about the president. We weren't trying to say anything about the NFL. But watch what happened. The NFL, patriotism, whiteness centered itself in a conversation about justice and then pointed the finger at the people who were crying out for justice and said, you are disrespecting us. We're not disrespecting you. If it's disrespectful to you for us to cry out for justice, what does that say about you? I watched last week a former church that I had some affiliation with. Someone that I was a colleague with at that church shared a video of a black person who attended that church. This was this black man who attends that church, I guess, uploaded his own Facebook Live video. And my old colleague shared this video, and the video was about apologizing to white people. Now I clicked on it because I thought this was clickbait. I thought this was an intriguing title that was just trying to draw people into a conversation or draw people into some content that was actually going to be helpful. And I tuned into it, and I'm watching, and I kind of skip forward, and I hear him say that I, as a black man, want to apologize for the black community. I want to come to the table and I want to apologize. And he starts apologizing for things like BET. He says, I'm sorry for black entertainment television. I don't even remember everything he said after that, to be honest with you guys, because as I'm listening to this, I'm like, you have already approached this as if we're having a debate and a conversation with both sides with equal things to bring to the table. Let me be very clear about this if I've not been clear before. Both sides of the racism conversation do not bring equal parts to it. There is oppressors, descendants of those oppressors. There is whiteness that centers itself and tries to become the default and oppresses and leads to implicit biases about black people, which causes the situations that we've seen happen in black communities, from Ahmaud Arbery to Breonna Taylor to Rashard Brooks on Friday night. A Tatiana Jefferson last year who was in her own home, minding her own business, playing video games with her nephew. These deaths are the result of the centering of whiteness, period. Any person who is having a conversation about justice, not a person who's here to debate and trying to keep whiteness intact while we move forward towards justice. If you're trying to move forward into justice while keeping whiteness intact, while keeping your privilege, while keeping the pride that you have in being white, we don't get to justice that way. And we are not here to debate about Black lives and them mattering, about the racism that we see. We're not here to even debate about defunding the police. Anyone who is paying attention and anyone who is seeking to have a conversation about justice can easily recognize that there is something wrong with the way Black people, Black and brown people, but specifically today talking about the way Black people are policed. Anyone who is paying attention, the only way that you do not see that is because your whiteness has covered your eyes. And that whiteness that you hold to and cling to is so dense, and it's connected to a white European Jesus who hovers above everything and doesn't get involved in the conversation, but yet somehow still affords you the privilege to be white. Unless you're blinded by that, or unless you're just flat out ignorant to what's happening right in front of your face, there is no credence or validity that you can give to anyone suggesting that Black folks need to come to the table and apologize to white people. For what? For being angry? Who wouldn't be angry on the, as I call it all the time, on the blunt end of oppression? On this side of oppression, who wouldn't be angry? You notice how many conversations, for those of you who read the scriptures, how many conversations Jesus had where he was condemning the zealots? When Jesus was on trial, Jesus Barabbas, Pilate presents two options. He says, you can have Jesus. I can give you Jesus Barabbas, who was a leader, more like a William Wallace type, who was leading a violent resistance to Roman oppression. Or I can give you Jesus, who's doing nonviolent resistance to Roman oppression. We know how the story goes. But either way, the empire doesn't like resistance. Modern day, we don't execute. I pray we don't. We don't blatantly execute the voices of resistance to oppression and racism and white supremacy. We just fill their timelines and their phones and our interactions with them with debates about the validity of their cry for justice. If you can look a Black person straight in the face, square in the face, and say that chattel slavery did not happen. This Friday is Juneteenth. We will celebrate across this country the day that slavery ended in America, the last day of slavery in America, but that was not the last day of anti-Blackness in America. If you can look a Black person in the face and say that we have no effects in our country from slavery to the Jim Crow segregation era to right now, if those things do not affect us right now, if you can look a Black person in the face and say that, I don't even know where I'm going with that sentence because I don't know how you could. I'm not sure how you do that. I'm not sure how you say you're a person that is about justice, or a person who believes in the divine, the good, compassionate, just nature of God. I'm not sure how you're that person, looks out in the world and sees the blatant inequities. Justice is about making sure that everyone has equal access to safety, resources, food, water, shelter, healthcare, all of those things. That is what, if you're a person of faith and you've read a holy book, those holy books are about how do we live amongst each other in a way that preserves everyone's rights, everyone's peace, everyone's wholeness. When it is broken, we as human beings have an obligation to fix it, not to debate about it. We're not here to debate. There's no obligation. There's no sacred text I've ever come across that says, hey, you know what, guys, when you see injustice, it's time to have a conversation and debate about it. No, it's not time to debate about it. It's time to fix it. And especially in America in 2020, We have had so many moments of recognizing, oh, we still have work to do. Oh, yeah, maybe we shouldn't enslave other human beings. Oh, maybe they shouldn't have to drink out of a dirty ass water fountain in the back of the by the porta potties. Oh, maybe there is implicit bias amongst police officers and bank tellers and school teachers and principals, and maybe there is. We keep coming to these realizations, and then for whatever reason we come to the realization and we go, okay, that's all we're going to do is realize that there's something wrong and then debate about it. We need to stop that. And Black folks are tired of the conversation, which is why in Atlanta this weekend they took to the streets yet again. But just so you are aware, the Wendy's that caught on fire was not set on fire by Black folks. Just to be clear about that, before you start running with conversations about the rioters and how awful they are. If your focus moves to the response to injustice instead of the injustice itself, you should check your own heart, and you should evaluate yourself, because that is the same kind of dangerous mindset and mentality and heart condition that led those two white vigilantes to lynch Ahmaud Arbery and the third person to record it. It's the same type of ideology. It's the same type of heart condition that allows police officers to stand by idly while their brothers or one of their brothers kneels and puts his neck for 8 minutes and however many seconds it was on the back of the neck of a human being. It's that same kind of mentality that causes police to run in Breonna Taylor's house with a no-knock warrant and kill her while she sleeps. And to this day, none of them have faced charges for it. That is what we are here to deal with, that injustice. We're not here to debate. We are here for justice. Folks, thank you so much for listening to me talk about this. If you are new to these conversations, new to me on Facebook and new to me on YouTube. On Facebook, unfortunately, I have reached a max of friends that I can have here on my personal page, but I do have a public page that you can join and follow and friend me there. If you are not a part of our Patreon community and you'd like to be a part of that, the link to the Patreon community is in the comments, both on YouTube and on Facebook. I so appreciate you being a part of this. If you've watched this from start to finish, that must mean that it's something that I said resonated with you. Feel free, you never have to ask me. Feel free to share this, share the link with YouTube, with whoever you want to. And on Facebook, feel free to share this. I so appreciate all of you. God bless you. Until next time, grace and peace.